create a new project and then define what ratio I'm going to be working with. So again, you do have some presets, and the numbers here that are under each one is the canvas or the stage size. So for our projects, for our experiments, I'm going to go with 1920 by 1080. Okay, the frame rate is something that for now we're not going to look into. And the platform type, we're always going to work with ActionScript. We're not going to be doing any coding, so we're not going to choose HTML. It's ActionScript 3.0. Okay, and then I'm going to click Create. When you first look at it, you can change the layout. So there are some workspaces that are already made for you. So let's say if you're animating, you might choose a different interface. So see, now everything is changed. The layout is changed. Or you could choose another one. Or let's designer. And you could even move around the panels. Okay, so I can move them around and then maybe place one here. I could change it into the way that I like to work. I personally like to work with the Essentials one. And it's for me, it's a good base. So on your right, you're going to see the Properties panel. And by default, it's going to show you the properties of the document settings. So let's say I don't like the stage, I don't like the stage size. I could change it here. So 1080 by 1080, now it's changed. I could even change the color of the stage. Okay, we'll just keep it back. 920. Okay, so you can change it midway through your project. On your left, we have the tools bar. Okay, and each one has a different purpose, which I'm going to go through with you guys. And at the bottom, you would see the timeline, and this is where we're going to be doing the animation. Now, let's start with our toolbar. So let me just zoom in. I'm going to start with the Shapes tool. So if I go into it, you're going to see this color change. So we have green and then black. The green is called the fill. It's what's going to be the color that's going to be inside our shape. So I could choose any color. I could also change the opacity. So if I want it to be fully, like a full color, an opaque color, or if it's going to be transparent, see-through, so I'll just keep it to black, or I could even make it with no fill. So if I click this, it's going to be with no color. Okay, so let's choose this orange color. And then for the stroke, it's the same thing. We have the alpha. We could change the transparency. We could also make it with no stroke. So for now, we'll just keep it with a stroke, and then I could draw. Okay. Now, if I select the selection tool, I'm going to select the shape. Okay, let me just double click. Now, you'll notice that the properties has changed. Before, it used to be the document setting, right? This properties panel, it's sensitive to whatever you're pressing on. If I click text, it's going to be different. If I clicked the pen tool, it's going to be different, and so on. So it changes according to what tool you're using. So now if I double click, I could look at the properties of this shape, and I could change the color again, and I could change the stroke color. Okay, I could also change the stroke, and I even could change the transparency here. So you could play around with your shape. Now, you'll notice that I have the selection tool turned on. If I click the shape once, I'll be only selecting the fill. But if I click twice, I'm selecting both the fill and the stroke. I could also only select one side of the shape. So if I just click once, I'm only selecting one side of the shape, and I could move it around. If I click twice, I'm selecting the full stroke. Okay, and I could move it around and play with it. Now, while I have the selection tool turned on, when I go to the stroke, notice how what's under the cursor changes. So now there's like there's like a slight curve under. If I drag this, I'm manipulating the stroke. So it's a curve. But if I go over and click options, I'm adding a point. So that gives you another way to manipulate the shape. Now I could also, with the selection tool, select part of the shape and then detach it or remove it. Okay, so let's go like this and remove. Okay, now this is the selection tool. We have something called the sub-selection tool. And what this does is plays with the points in your shape. So let's say I could move it around. I could move a point. I could select 2 points and move them. Okay. So this is the sub-selection tool. Now the way to go from this tool to this tool is that I would press on my mouse and then I would see the different tools that I have. So if I click the shapes tool, I could also see other types of shapes. So I could have the oval. Now, when I'm like dragging my cursor, I'm doing the shape. If I wanted to keep the ratio of the shape fixed, I would click Shift. Now notice I have this perfect circle that I'm working with. We also have the bucket tool, and this basically colors in your artwork. So let's go with orange, and I could color it in. Let's draw another shape. Okay, so zoom out. And I'm gonna color this with yellow. Okay, now I have these 3 shapes. If I wanted to use this orange and add it into this shape, I'm gonna use what's called the eyedropper tool. So if I select this color, I could drop it into my other shapes. Now this is the eyedropper, bucket tool. We also have something called the pen tool, and this is used to draw. So I would click and I would add points and I would create shapes. If I only click, I'm drawing straight lines with edges. If I click and drag, I'm creating curves. Okay? Could delete. Let's say I wanted to adjust one part of this drawing. So I'm going to use the sub-selection tool and move around and change the handles and the points in this shape. Okay. Now let's delete. We have something called the brush tool. So there are 2 types of brushes. One is the classic brush. Now I could draw. So notice the properties panel, it changed also to match the tool that I'm using. And we also have something called the fluid brush tool. And this gives you a different style of drawing. It gives you it's more artistic, I would say. So let's just add the stabilizer and slightly make it smaller. Okay, so this is the fluid brush tool. Let's say I drew something and I wanted to erase parts of it. So I can use the selection tool, and remove parts of it. Or I could use the eraser. Okay, and again, could change the adjustment of the eraser to match whatever you're doing. Okay, when you're working, always have your left hand on the keyboard, so then it's easy for you to perform tasks. So let's say I did something, I want to do undo. Command Z. Okay, or Command A, and I would select all the elements and I would delete. So always use shortcuts. Learn how to use shortcuts. We have the line tool also. Could use it. And I could also move around. So this hand tool, it helps me move around. And let's say I drew a shape and I wanted to rotate it. There are different ways in which you could do this. One is that you would right click, transform, and then rotate or flip. Okay, or you could use the free transform tool, and this gives you points in which you could rotate, you could skew, change the scale, and so on. Okay, so it gives you a lot of flexibility working with shapes. Now, there are 2 types of rectangle tools. This one is the regular rectangle, and then we also have the rectangle primitive tool. And the difference between them is that this one, you have the option to add curved edges. So let's go down. I could add a curve, 70. Okay. I could also choose in the independent edges in the shape, so I could change them to, let's say, 150 for this one, 150 here, and then these two might be 0 and 0. Okay, now there is a difference between them other than the edges, is that this one, the top one, the regular rectangle, you could select it easily. So notice the small dots here, could you see them? They give you, like, I could manipulate it in a different way. The rectangle tool does not allow you to do that. So let's say if I wanted to select part of it, I'm only selecting the outline. Okay, if I wanted to change this and turn it into a regular shape, you could click this, expand to fill. Now I have the properties of this shape. Now let's change this color. So let's go with blue. Okay, I'm gonna add an oval. I'll change the color to green. Now you can, in Adobe Animate, if you're working on one layer, use a shape to cut another shape. So if I wanted to create a hole in this rectangle, I'm gonna select this shape and put it inside of this top shape. I'm gonna click here in the empty space, and then I'm gonna remove. Now I have a hole in this shape. Okay, so that might be helpful if maybe you're creating symbols or icons. Once you're done, you're gonna click File, Export, and then you could export it into a movie or a GIF or a video. For our case, I'm going to create only artwork, export image. And then I'm going to make it into a JPEG image, quality 100. And then I'm going to save and locate where it's going to be saved. So task, save. And we are done.